Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After we run you through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. A ton of stuff to talk about in today's show. 2 crazy trades and a crazy cut and wave by the Miami Dolphins. I should say wave by the Miami Dolphins. I did not see this coming. It's going to be a real interesting topic of how this was handled and how people look at the move, because I think a lot of people are going to think it's a failure. And we'll get into that later. But let's start with this first news story, which is crazy. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins have traded linebacker Raekwon McMillan to the Raiders. The Dolphins have agreed to trade linebacker Raekwon McMillan to the Raiders, according to a source who spoke with Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. In exchange, the Raiders are sending a 2021 fourth-round pick to Miami, but they'll also receive a 2021 fifth-round pick along with McMillan. So the Dolphins are trading a fifth-round pick and Raekwon McMillan for a fourth-round pick. Now, don't know why we have to send another draft pick. And the Dolphins have been really loose with their later-round picks over the last 2 years. Now, they have a lot of them, and they have a lot of high-end draft capital, too. So it's not that big of a deal. But they have been really generous with that. They're not really afraid to move some of those picks, which is something New England does a lot. Sorry, the throat's a little had to clear the throat there. So, it's an interesting trade. I think the reason he was traded is not because he's a bad player, because I do think he fits the scheme really well, and I think some of his shortcomings are a little overrated. And I'll get into that here in a second, but I think the reason he was traded, to get to my point, is because there was too many cooks in the kitchen. Like I've said before, there's a lot of linebackers on this team. Now, they did lose some to injury, like Vince Beagle. But even saying that, and obviously Curtis Weaver, who was unexpectedly cut, even saying that, they still have a lot of players on this defense that they probably view as three-down guys. I mean, people forget about Gruger Hill, Elandon Roberts, Sam McGuavin, not Raekwon McMillan, he obviously was just traded, Jerome Baker, Kyle Van Noy, Andrew Van Ginkel. That's a lot of people at that position. You got to get it down to a 53-man roster. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. A lot of those guys are three-down guys, and you got a draft pick out of it, which you then flipped for an interesting prospect, and we'll get into that here in a second. But I think it was a good move by the Dolphins. Like I said, Raekwon is not a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's actually an underrated scheme fit in this scheme. I think he did a lot of really good things for us last year within that New England scheme. But like I said, I think there was just too many cooks in the kitchen. You have to get it down to a 53-man roster. You want to stockpile other positions that you might feel are a little bit weaker, you just want a little bit more depth at. Or you got some prospects where you want to develop a little bit more and you want to just, accumulate that talent. And they felt that, hey, we have all this depth at this position. We don't necessarily need the player. Even though he is a good player, we have other good players there. We have a lot of depth there. We might as well get something out of it. So I think it actually is an underratedly good move if you think about it like that, in my opinion. It took me a while to get around to that, and I was like, because I really like him as a player, and I think he's a great run defender. But I do understand the trade, and I think it was a good move. Like I said, you got too many cooks in the kitchen. You got to get it down to a 53-man, and you flip him for something that you can use. And really, they did a good job of what they ended up flipping the pick for, and we'll get into that here in a second. But I also want to talk about Raekwon McMillan and his years in Miami, because I really liked him as a player. I think when you look at his career here, underrated. He played outside and inside linebacker in this scheme with Brian Flores. He did a really good job of that. I think his coverage skills are underrated. I never thought he was Kiko Alonso bad. He was never asked to do some of the things that Kiko Alonso was asked to do in some of those schemes. But anytime he was in coverage, I don't think it was that bad. I don't think he was ever on Kiko Alonso's level or some of the other linebackers that have come through Miami. And we were giving up the most yards to tight ends in the league for a long time there. He was never that bad. He had his moments. I can think of a few plays where he's given up a big play when he was asked to man up a running back, but that's not his game. And I think as a zone guy and a 4-3 guy, I think he's going to be a good player. So yeah, I say what you will about how that ended up in Miami. I think he was always a solid pick. Obviously, his career got to a rocky start with the ACL tear in preseason. Nobody still knows why he was on the punt team in practice or in a preseason game, because we knew he was going to make the team. But that's neither here nor there. We've moved on from the Adam Gase era. We don't have to look back on some of the stupid decisions that were made in that era. We can move on. But yeah, like I said, he had a good career in Miami. Made a lot of good plays last year, and it's sad to see him go. But at the same time, I understand why they did it, and I like what they got out of it. So let's move on to what the Dolphins did with that 4th round pick, which was the most surprising news. Well, not the most surprising. I guess it's pretty surprising, but. So this comes from Pro Football Rumors. The Dolphins have traded for running back Lynn Bowden Jr. from the Raiders. So this was the Raiders' 3rd round pick this past draft, and the Dolphins traded for him with that 4th round pick that they got for Raekwon McMillan. And we're going to talk about the player in the trade right now. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. We've got a bit of an unusual trade to pass along. The Raiders are trading a rookie running back, Lynn Bowden Jr., and a 6th round pick to the Dolphins in exchange for a 4th round pick. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reports. So again, the Dolphins flipped the 4th that they got from. This is the same team, which is weird. They got the 4th round pick. They sent it back to the Raiders in exchange for Lynn Bowden Jr. So they flipped Raekwon McMillan for a really good prospect, and he's not just a running back. If you know Lynn Bowden Jr., we're going to get into that right now. I think he's a really good prospect. I think the trade and the maneuvering that they did to get him is really smart. They filled a need that they wanted to fill, where they already had a lot of depth. They didn't need Raekwon McMillan. They flipped him for a player that they can actually use and develop, and I think he's a really good prospect. Let's get into the player right now. So first things first, the first thing anybody's wondering is why the heck the Raiders would move on from a 3rd round pick that fast, especially since they don't have the greatest running back depth in the world. So he had some off the field issues, so maybe that's a factor into this. I like Brian Flores' leadership. If he just like Mark Walton. Mark Walton got here, he had a ton of off the field issues, and he continued to have them, and then he got cut immediately. So if that happens with him, I'm sure he's going to be on a short leash, 4th round pick or not. Used on him. I don't think it's going to be an issue, especially within this locker room. But let's talk about the player and what you see from him in college. So let's pull up some of his stats. By the way, he averaged 8 yards a carry in college. That's the biggest stat I have to remember because I didn't have that written down. I had to remember that. He almost had 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He was literally 200 yards off of 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He had over 300 receiving yards and 1,400 rushing yards. He had 13 touchdowns in total. So to describe this man is an interesting one because if you watch him play, he played a lot of quarterback. A lot of his rushing yards came from the wildcat position. He was asked to throw a lot at Kentucky. He was also a receiver a lot of the time as well. And that explains the 300 yards. But he literally lined up at receiver a good amount. And he didn't get a lot of snaps there. So those numbers could be inflated. His second year at Kentucky, he had almost 1,000 yards receiving with 745. So he's always been utilized at both positions. He's listed as a receiver in college, but I don't really know how to describe his game. He played quarterback, he played receiver, he played running back. He played all 3 positions in college. And like I said, most of his rushing yards come from the wildcat position. He's a really nifty runner, elusive, smaller dude, athletic. I really like his game. He's just an all-around really good football player. Not as big as Taysom Hill, but again, this is another Taysom Hill-like player, for sure. Like, that was literally how he was utilized in college. This is just like Taysom Hill. He was at quarterback, he was at receiver, he was at running back. I'm sure if he was bigger, he would have been a tight end at times, just like Taysom Hill does at times. But just an extremely versatile player, and he can help you on special teams. He can really develop into something nice. And I'm interested to see where he goes. Like I said, very versatile, explosive, very, very, very similar to Malcolm Perry in that way, but he's a 3rd round pick. And I don't really know why either he had a bad camp or he had some serious off the field issues. And the Raiders, especially with the Gruden era so far, has not been great in terms of leadership. They've had a lot of issues with people off the field in that locker room. Derek Carr's kind of been all over the place with some of the things that he said as well. So I don't necessarily think that's the best environment for someone like him. Coming to our team, I think it could be improved, and I'm excited to see where his career goes. I can't really describe. I don't know how the Dolphins are going to use him. I think they're just going to use him like they used him in college, if I had to guess. I don't think he's going to play running back. I don't think he's going to exclusively play receiver either. I think he's going to help us a lot on special teams, though. I could see him being somewhat of a primary guy there. And again, he averaged 8 yards a carry in college, dude. His last year at Kentucky, he averaged 8 yards a carry. Just a really good player. And this is the SEC, dude. So you got to think, almost 2,000 yards in the closest thing to pro football in college, with well over 10 touchdowns in that single season, is pretty dang good production. And he's very fun to watch too. If you guys haven't watched him, he's very fun to watch. I'm excited to see where he goes, and I think he's a great to trade someone that you don't necessarily need and to flip that for a really good prospect. I really just liked what the Dolphins did there. So that gets me really excited. I'm really excited to see him in a Dolphins uniform because he did make the final 53-man roster. Not to spoil things, because we're gonna break that down, but he did make the final 53. So he's gonna be on the team. I'm excited to see. And without him, it's interesting that he made the final 53 without them even seeing anything from camp. Now we've heard a lot of the time, especially this particular regime in this organization, they do their research. So I'm sure that they didn't hear negative things about his performance in camp. It must have been personality, if I had to guess, because they're big on that in Oakland. I mean, that's all Mike Mayock and Gruden talk about. That's all they talk about. And it's like, well, you guys don't really have the greatest structure there, as we've seen. It hasn't gone very well not in Oakland, in Las Vegas now, I guess. So we'll see if he does better in this locker room. I'm excited to see him play, too. It just adds another skill, another weapon, and adds more speed, more versatility, and another weapon for this offense to be utilized, and a really good prospect as well. Really like what the Dolphins did there. Not just getting rid of Raekwon McMillan, but they flipped him for a really good young player. Very odd that the Raiders would give up on a third-round pick that fast, though. I think, like I said, they are built... Las Vegas, I guess now. I keep saying Oakland. They are big with personality and off-the-field stuff, so I could see that being the main reason they traded him. And maybe that they're like, maybe you guys can handle him. We don't want to handle him anymore. And that, because I cannot imagine that. Like I said, the Dolphins do a ton of research. I don't understand, from what we've heard with them selecting other players, I wouldn't think this regime would have heard that he had a terrible camp. And then, I'm sure they did their due diligence in their research, and they made the right call. I would have to think this was off the field, especially since he made the 53-man roster without them even seeing him in any kind of practice or anything with the Dolphins. So let's move on to the next news story. I'm really excited about him, though. I think he can be a very good player. That kind of production in the SEC is very unheard of, and usually you get picked at least in the second round with that kind of production, so I'm excited. So move on to the next news story. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. This is the saddest news. Listen, I've been on this train since we traded for him, and I really thought he was going to be with the team for at least another year after this year, just to continue to develop him, but that's not what happened. Very, very kind of, I don't know. We'll see where his career goes, but let's get into this news story. And we'll see how the Dolphins fans view this trade, because I still think it was worth the shot. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins waive quarterback Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen will be, sadly, a one-and-done with his second NFL team. The Dolphins will release the third-year quarterback. Ian Rappaport of NFL.com tweets. Miami, which acquired Rosen in a 2019 trade from Arizona, attempted to ship the former top 10 pick out in another trade. It didn't end up working. The Dolphins ended up having to waive him. Yeah, they wasted a set. No, I wouldn't say wasted. I don't think it was a waste. I don't know how people are going to view this. Let's start here before we get into how people are going to view it. Let's start with just an interesting decision. I think this is another situation where they needed more roster space, I guess, for other players, and they were like, listen, we're not carrying 3 of these guys. Let's try to flip Rosen. That didn't end up working out. They ended up cutting him. I don't think this Dolphins team, with the state of the franchises now, would have just cut him if they didn't like what they see. Now, his camp was up and down. He had good days, he had bad days, from what we've heard from the media. So that kind of continued into this year, but we've also heard that he's improved. a good amount from year 1 to year 2. He was actually with the team longer than any other quarterback this year, practicing with his teammates. So I don't know. It's just a weird career that he's had. To be a top 10 pick at the quarterback position, to have 1 year with a team. Literally, if you think about it, he had 1 year with the Cardinals, 1 year with us, and he's gone. Very weird career, and I don't know. I don't really know how to think about this. I would have kept him on. I'm not there in the building though, so I can't say. What is it worth it or is it not? I mean, they did invest a lot. They invested a second round pick. I think I would have liked him to stick around a little bit longer if I was, but I don't know. Maybe, from what we've heard, it wasn't terrible, but maybe they didn't really see much improvement there. They wanted to move on. I'm not really sure. Just a very weird set of circumstances there with Josh Rosen. Now, let's get on to how people think how Dolphins fans think about this trade. I know some of you are going to think it's a complete and utter waste of a second round pick, because I know a lot of you weren't necessarily on the wagon to begin with, but I think it was worth the shot. This is a top 10 guy. This is a top 10, a lot of people thought he was, top 5 talent. Some people thought he was the best quarterback in the draft. So I think you have to take that chance on a quarterback, and I don't think it was, at the end of the day, a bad move. So I wanted to bring up, because I think it's interesting how people are going to view this trade. I wanted to go back to the second round of the 2018 draft to see who all was there that the Dolphins could have had if they didn't trade for Rosen. I thought that would be fun. I meant to say the 2019 draft. Obviously, he was picked in 2018. The Dolphins made the trade for him in 2019. So looking at the second and third round results, the Dolphins didn't miss out on a ton of talent there. It wasn't too insane. Now, maybe in the 5th and 6th and 7th round, I didn't go through that. There was someone else there. I can't really remember if there was. But going through the 2nd and 3rd round, they didn't miss out on a whole lot. I would say the 3 best players that they could have had is Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, and David Montgomery that the Bears picked, who's a good player. That's probably the 3 best players they could have picked at that position. In my opinion, at least in some of the players that were selected. So, if you wanted, obviously I think we would all have taken DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, and even David Montgomery over what ended up happening. But you can't see the future. It's easy to go back in the past and judge. Again, I don't think, in my opinion, it was that bad. And again, at the time, nobody knew DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin were going to be this good. So it's easy to look back on stuff and say, okay, this is what we should have done. I still think you have to take a shot at the quarterback. And I'm not bitter about that trade at all. I'm interested to see what you guys think about it. Like I said, the 3 best players that they could have had at that position, this was going through the 2nd and 3rd round, is Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf, and David Montgomery, which are all offensive players, which would have been nice to have, that's for sure. But the Dolphins ended up getting Preston Williams, so it all kind of shakes out anyway. So let's get to the 53-man roster, ladies and gentlemen. It was released today, I believe, and this is the final 53 going into week 1 of the regular season, which is just around the corner. So this is your Miami Dolphins quarterbacks that made the 53-man roster. Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua Tagovailoa. Obviously, we didn't need to read that. It's pretty obvious. This is your running backs. The Dolphins ended up keeping 6, which is crazy. So this is the 6 running backs that they ended up keeping on the roster, which some of these guys are going to be used in different ways. Matt Breida, Chandler Cox, who's a fullback, Myles Gaskin, Jordan Howard, Patrick Laird, and Malcolm Perry all made the final 53-man roster. Interesting that, it's interesting that Chandler Cox made the team. I guess they're going to still do some I formation stuff, even though Chan Gailey didn't really do that in New York, at least. With the Jets, he didn't do that. But maybe, I like Chandler Cox and what he did for us last year. I think it's sensible to keep him around and keep some of those packages around and utilize some of his talent, because I like him as a player. And Malcolm Perry, obviously not just a running back. He's more of a versatile guy that he's going to be used in a lot of different situations. I know that he was tried at slot receiver in camp, so he's going to move around a lot, so he's not really a running back. So in all reality, the Dolphins kept 4 running backs, because Chandler Cox is a fullback and Malcolm Perry is more of a He's more of a lot of different things. He's a special teams player. He's a receiver. He's, who knows if they'll use him in the Wildcat. He's more of a versatile more of a Swiss Army knife gadget type of a player. So in reality, the Dolphins ended up keeping 4 true running backs on their roster, but still 6 listed running backs that they ended up keeping. This is your final 53-man roster wide receivers that the Dolphins kept. And that includes Lynn, Bowden Jr., who they're listing as a receiver like he was listed in college. Maybe they switch that and put him at running back. We'll see, but I'm excited to see what he can do. So this is your receivers for the final 53. Lynn, Bowden Jr., Isaiah Ford. A round of applause for Isaiah Ford making the team again. I really like his game. I'm excited about it. I'm very excited to see him in this offense as well, in Shane Gailey's offense. Jakeem Grant made the final 53. Matt Collins, who apparently had a really good camp, which I'm excited about, who's kind of a bigger receiver who can run. Devontae Parker and Preston Williams. Very interesting final 53. Now, obviously a lot of injuries with Albert Wilson and Allen Hurns, but still a really solid group with Lynn Bowden, Isaiah Ford, Jakeem Grant, Matt Collins, Devontae Parker, and Preston Williams. A lot of speed, a lot of versatility at that position. I really like that group a lot. If I had to guess your starting lineup, I would say your 2 outsides are Devontae and Preston. And I'd say your slot's probably going to be Isaiah Ford. And if the Dolphins go 5 wide, most of those guys are going to be out there anyway. And if they go 4 wide, I would say probably Jakeem Grant would be the other guy that would be in there. Very interesting lineup, and I like it. These are your final 53-man tight ends. Only 3 tight ends made the team. Sorry, I'm just drinking this coffee. So 3 tight ends made the team. Mike Gesicki, Adam Shaheen, and Durham Smythe made the team. Nice group. Durham Smythe is a really good blocker. Mike Gesicki, obviously, I'm very excited about, especially in this offense. And Adam Shaheen, people forget, dude. Coming out of college, obviously the Dolphins made the trade this offseason for him, but coming out of college, he's 6'7". Really athletic. He ran a 4.8 40 for someone that size. And he was drafted as a receiving tight end, but he ended up obviously dealt with a lot of injuries in the NFL, never really could get going. Hopefully he's healthy again, and we can see some of the fruits of that trade because, again, a really interesting prospect that could develop into something pretty good. And he's always been a good blocker, so he can be utilized in that way as well. This is your final 53 offensive line. 9 offensive linemen made the final 53. Julian Davenport, Jesse Davis, Michael Dieter, Eric Flowers, Robert Hunt, Austin Jackson, Ted Karras, Adam Pankey, and Solomon Kinley all made the roster. So, I mean, that's to be expected, most of these guys. If I had to say your final 5 here, according to, I don't know, if we go by training camp, I think Austin Jackson is going to start. I think Jesse Davis is going to start at right tackle. I think your guards are probably going to be Kinley and Flowers, and your center is going to be Karras, if I had to guess. Oh, and Michael Dieter. I don't think I said Michael Dieter's name. If Michael Dieter does play, I think he's going to be the backup center to Karras, if I had to bet. A really nice lineup. A really nice depth at that position. Probably the most deep, especially deep young offensive line that we've had in a long time. Let's move on to the defensive line. This is your final 53 that made... this is a defensive line that made the final 53. 70 linemen made the final 53. Raekwon Davis, who apparently had an outstanding camp. I'm excited to see what he does in the regular season. Devon Godshaw, who has been very good for us. Really solid late-round pick for the Miami Dolphins there. Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, Zach Sealer made the team. I know that's a fan favorite. Get a round of applause for him. I'm very excited to see his development. Obviously, the Dolphins got him off of the Ravens practice squad last year. And the one game that he really shined was in the game against Cincinnati. He literally made a game. He, first of all, made a lot of plays in that game, but I think his most important play is he was pretty much one-on-one. He was the only man who could stop Joe Mixon, or it would have been a long touchdown run. And he did. He blew up the guard and made the play. I'm very excited about Zach Sealer. The rest of the guys that made the roster, Jason Strowbridge, who apparently had a really good camp as well, and Christian Wilkins. Very solid solid rotation there. I really like the rotation, really like the defensive line. All of those guys I'm excited about, by the way. There's not one guy that I'm like, oh, that guy's not good. Raekwon Davis, Devon Gottschall, Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, Zach Sealer, Jason Strobridge, and Christian Wilkins. I'm all very, very, very good rotation that the Dolphins have acquired out their defensive line. Very excited about it. This is your final 53 linebackers that made the roster. 7 of them made the roster. Jerome Baker, Sam McGuavin, Gruger Hill, Calvin Munson, Landon Roberts, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Kyle Van Noy all made the final 53. And again, let's say Curtis Weaver was still on the team and Raekwon McMillan was still on the team. That's 9 linebackers on the team. And that's, if you want 9 of anything, it would definitely be offensive linemen. You want to accumulate as much of those as you can due to the injuries and all of that other stuff. Linebackers, it's just a really deep position that the Dolphins have, and all of those guys I'm excited about. Jerome Baker, Sam McGuavin, Gruger Hill, Calvin Munson, Landon Roberts, Van Ginkel, and Van Noy. All of those guys I think are solid players, and I'm excited to see what they do in this defense. This defense is so talented. I really like it. This is your final 53 cornerbacks that made the roster. 5 DBs made it. These are corners, I shouldn't say DBs because you get that confused with safeties, but these are the 5 corners that made it. Xavier Howard, Noah Igbenogany, Byron Jones, Nick Needham, Jamal Perry, all made the final 53. This is the deepest group by far at the cornerback position that we've had in a long time. I'm super excited about this. With obviously the Byron Jones and Xavier Howard situation is going to be awesome, but Igbenogany, who has apparently been the surprise of camp and the best rookie at camp, super excited about that. Nick Needham, who had a great year last year as an undrafted rookie. I'm very excited about this defense. I think it's very talented, and the sky is the limit for this defense. If they can continue to add to it and develop it, it really is the sky is the limit for this defense. And the safety position. 5 safeties made the final 53. Here are your safeties that made the final 53. Clayton Fedulum, Kayvon Frazier, Brandon Jones, Bobby McCain, and Eric Rowe. I would assume Eric Rowe and Bobby McCain are going to start, from what we've heard at camp at least. I know Eric Rowe had a good camp. We'll see and I know Bobby had a pretty solid camp as well. But this is probably the weakest group of the team, I would say. I like Fedulum a lot. I think he had a good camp too. I know he made some plays too. So I'm excited to see, maybe Fedulum can start. I don't know. We'll see. There's interesting guys there. Like Brandon Jones and Fedulum. We'll see how it all shakes out, but I think that's probably the weakest room of the team. Even though I really like Eric Rowe, I think he's a good player. And these are your 3 specialists to round out the group. Blake Ferguson is your long snapper, your kicker is Jason Sanders, and your punter is Matt Hawk. I really like this roster. I think it's really good. I'm excited. I didn't think anybody other than Rosen, but that was more of a developmental piece, who wasn't really going to make an impact on the team. Excuse me. But from all of if you break down this roster, dude, a lot of really good young players are on it, and there's not one guy that I'm like, God, he's gonna be rough there, or it's gonna be rough there. Night and day from last year. I mean, if you went through the 53-man roster last year, it was, especially during the season, it was very bad. I mean, the defensive line alone would make you cry. So it's just night and day from last year. It's so much better than last year. There is a lot of young players on this roster, and that could come back to haunt the Dolphins, I guess you could say. We'll see how. I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people bring up the experience factor. They do have a lot of good veterans on the team though this year. So I don't know if that's. Especially with the secondary. The secondary is full of veterans. X and Byron. And then you have Rowe and Bobby. Those are all vets. So I don't think it's that crazy of I think it's a good mixture of young and old. And I'm excited about it. Breaking down this 53, it just gets me more excited about the season. I really like this roster. Very excited about it. And every single one of these guys fits the scheme. And to add, what's his name? Let me scroll up. I don't want to forget his name. I don't want to mispronounce his name here. Let's see. God. Lynn Bowden Jr. To add him to the group, I'm excited. They've done this organization just does smart stuff. Again, like I said, they have a lot of depth at the linebacker position, too many cooks in the kitchen. Didn't necessarily need him. Flip him for a really nice prospect that could really impact the offense and the future of the team. I'm really liking what this front office has done with the team. I'm so excited to see this defense. I cannot wait to see this defense. I need this defense to be seen tomorrow, dude. I'm so excited about it. Very excited about the offense as well. I think the 10th was today. Today's the 6th, so 4 days until we get a Thursday night game, which is cool. And then obviously a few days or 3 days after that, we get the first week of the official week of the NFL.